Hello everybody, welcome to another action-packed episode of Britannia Motorcycles. What I'm going to do today is explain the next sort of major project I'm doing, which if you've been following the Otter webpage, you'll see that Charlie mentioned I was planning to do a big bore conversion for the B25. So what I'm going to do today is to explain the outline of that project, and maybe even get some comments from you if you think I should do it differently. What I also want to do is mention something about OKO carburetors. Something I should have mentioned when I was actually putting it on, but what it is, it's a little tip from Roger Annable, who supplies these in the UK. He is OKO USA down in Maryland and also organises lots of trials down there. Very nice fella. Anyway, I'm going to zoom you in because I want to show you a little mod you can make to the float ball to make it a lot easier to experiment with the jetting if you're fitting this onto something that hasn't already been jetted up correctly. So let me zoom you in. Now, one thing about these carbs is the float ball's a little fiddly to get off because of the way this overflow tube is angled. You've got to sort of just jiggle it past the floats to get it in. So if you're experimenting with the jetting, it's annoying to have to keep taking this off to get the pilot jet. When you take the plug out of the bottom here, you can get at the main jet easily, but the pilot jet is just slightly to one side. So let me see if I can show you what you do here. Hold that up to him. You take a round file and you just file into here. Now the plug and its O-ring go right round the outer edge of this, so you're not going to cause this to leak, but what you can do there is you can form enough of a cutout that you can actually get at the pilot jet. So you can leave this on the carb and you can still get at the main jet and the pilot jet, and obviously getting at the needle is easy enough, so now you can fiddle onto your heart's content without having to take the carburetor off. So hopefully that shows up. There it is anyway, where it is. Yep, there it is at the top. Just that little bit taken out. Okay, so now let's talk about B25 big bores. Now then, before we start, let me make a disclaimer. It's a little bit like they used to put on the ends of programs, you know, to warn children that the people performing these stunts were professional stuntmen on specifically designed equipment. Well, here's a warning to you all at home. Don't necessarily do this. This is an experiment. This might work out to be absolutely brilliant, or it might blow my knees off when it all explodes. Who knows? But it's something I wanted to try. It's something I can do in the winter. And by the way, we've already had our first 8 inches of snow. It went from 70 degrees Friday, Saturday last week to 30 degrees on Sunday, and by Monday evening we had 8 inches of snow. Okay, so here we have our 247cc barrel, 67mm bore, 70mm stroke. So I was wanting to make this a bit bigger. Why? Just because I wanted to. Anyway, if you read Rupert Ratio's book, he mentions things like Triumph 500 liners going in there, and the place I get my pistons from, Ed V Racing, do a 280 conversion for this. So I got thinking, well, you know, what can we do here? What can we do? 280, it's hardly worth it. So I started to look at it, and I thought to myself, this aluminium boss, this extension here, which is there I suppose partly because, as we all know, the B range of bikes, they all use the same bottom end, just minor changes here and there, bolt patterns, so on. Do we really need this? Well, again, it's a trials bike. If this is for rigidity, I don't really think we're going to lose much rigidity by removing it. And if it's for heat transfer, well, again, it's a trials bike. It stops, it starts, it runs at low revs and so on. I don't think heat transfer to the cases is going to be a big issue either. So working on that premise, I thought to myself, okay, I could get a liner that comes right out to the edge of this. So I measured this, it's 79 millimeters, thereabouts. So I thought, okay, if we give ourselves a couple of millimeters thickness for the wall of the liner to allow us a rebore or two, we could go to a 75 millimeter bore. And 75 millimeters is going to give us 303 cc's. Now we're talking, I thought. So I went to the website for the piston manufacturers here in the US, Wiseco. I thought I wasn't going to be able to remember that. And they've got a great website with lots of sets of tables of different sizes and all the rest of it. And I started to look at them. Now, there was a bunch of pistons that were 75 millimeter bore, so I was looking good there. But I had two other things that I needed to take into account. One was the gudgeon pin size, or as it's called here, the wrist pin. Now, because the later B25s are just in the alloy eye itself, there's no bushing. This is 16 millimeter. Some of the 75 millimeter pistons I looked at were 21 millimeter pins, so I didn't want to take it out that much. The other thing is the actual piston, the crown height from the pin height. Now, when I was looking to get a low compression piston for this, before I got to EdV to provide them for me, I kept finding that I could get a 67 millimeter one, which incidentally is a very common size in two-strokes, but the gudgeon pin was always in a really poor place in relation to the crown, so I had to think about that as well. So I studied the various tables, and I discovered that the Yamaha FJ1200 was a 75 millimeter bore. It was only a 17 millimeter gudgeon pin, so a very light reaming, and we're okay there. And also the piston was really good for the pin placement. In fact, it lowered the crown slightly, and I've done some very rough maths on this, and it's going to give me just over 8 to 1. And as I'm looking at 8.5 to 1 on the other engines, that seemed pretty good. So I thought, okay, that's the way to go. Now, then I fell into a little bit of luck, because just out of daftness, I looked on eBay, put in FJ1200. What came up just down in Pennsylvania at a Bike Breakers was a set of cylinders with 4 pistons for $29, or best offer. So I offered him $20 and he said yes. $15 shipping, so for $35, you know, 20 quid, something like that. I had 4 liners, yes, 4, and 4 pistons. The reason this is being sawn in two is it was too big to go in my little oven. So I popped it in the oven and got out a liner. Now, this liner is slightly thicker in the wall than I would have got. Again, as I say, this is purely experimental. If it really works, I can go to LA Sleeve over in California, and they do all sorts of liners. I got one for a 500 matchless there not so long ago, right off the shelf. But what they do is sort of universal fit liners. They do them in all sorts of sizes and all sorts of lengths, and you can just tell them what you want and they'll cut it to length and so on, and chamfer it. So if this works, I can get an exactly correct one. Now, as you can see, it's just about, without that there, it's going to be just about right. But it is actually 80.2, I think, millimeters. Now, that's not a great problem, because I've still got enough room for the bolt holes and what have you. But again, you know, I'm trying to do this on an absolute minimum budget just to see if it will work. So if I use this liner, I would have to open the mouth of the crankcase out, and that would mean stripping the engine completely. And basically I don't want to do that. I just want to be able to do the barrel change when I get round to it. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to set it up in the lathe, and we're going to turn that millimetre off, and then we should be fine. Obviously we're going to have to be careful in the lathe. We're going to have to make sure we have concentricity and all the rest of it, although once this is in, I can always just run the horn down and make sure we're exactly right. I could even get it rebored to one size, because luckily these are standard pistons. But again, for this experiment we're trying to keep the cost right down. Now, I mentioned the size of it. It does come very close to the bolt holes. And of course on the B25, these bolt holes are in fresh air through the fins. And this worried me a little, until I spoke to my friend, Steam Shop Dave, who before he became Steam Shop Dave and ran his automotive machine shop, he ran a bike shop, and he was an agent for Hodaka and I think Rokon and stuff like that, Can-Am. And he was telling me one time he did a big bore conversion for a Honda from a company called, I think they're called Power Roll, something like that, in the US. And the chap brought in the cylinder and brought in the big bore kit, and Dave started boring and boring, and he started to get really worried about it. So he called Power Roll and spoke to one of the engineers there, and basically they said to him, just keep boring. And he said he could see the liner through the fins, but the bike worked perfectly. And this was a commercial big bore kit, so I presume they'd experimented well. So I'm not going to worry about that. But as I say, who knows, it might fall to pieces. So what the project is going to involve is taking the liner out of here, which I will show you. Then we're going to have to bore this out to fit our new liner. What we're going to do at the top is, instead of this sticking up here, we're going to make this flush with the top. Bottom gasket is going to be no problem, because of course we're still on this dimension here. Head gasket I'm going to ease slightly on the inside. Then that will go onto the bike. We're also going to have to do something for the gudgeon pin. So what we're going to do is make up a fixture that will allow us to just hand ream this while it's still in place. Basically what it's going to be is going to be a guide for this side, a clamp for that side, and the reamer can go in and just take that 1 millimetre off. Then we can fit our piston. Now there's quite a lot of meat in the top of this piston, so I could machine the top a little if I wanted. Maybe just take the backs off here to take the pockets out. But as I say, I think I'm going to be close to 8:1. I don't really want to go much below that. I know it's going to be a 300, but we'll see when we come closer to it. And I mean, I can always, if it doesn't work very well or I find it's too high a compression when I'm measuring exactly, I can always take the piston back off and do some work with them. One other effect of this, of course, is we're going to go from not exactly a long stroke motor, but a 67 by 70 to an over square motor. We're going to go to 75 by 70. So this is going to give us bigger piston area. So, you know, BMEP, brake mean effective pressure, is going to be different, and who knows, it rev a little freer. But that is the plan. Now, time for a comment. I was thinking of boring this on the mill, getting the liner out, putting a boring head in, doing it, and I could also do the little recess with the boring head. But I have a friend who runs a machine shop down in Pennsylvania and builds spectacular wooden boats, and he suggested that really it would be better to do it on the lathe, to make a fixture up to hold this probably through the bolt holes and do it on the lathe. I haven't decided. The mill would be easier because I wouldn't have to make a fixture up. I can clamp it down through the pushrod tunnel, and I can clamp it down back here as well, right across the back, chunk. So, I don't know. I think I'm going to go with the mill. Is there anything else I can think of? No, not really. So, let me jump up and look at the camera, because it sort of runs for 20 minutes and then switches itself off, which has caught me out. And then we'll come back to this. So, that's the project. There's all the bits and pieces we need. It'll probably be a bit hit and miss. I've mentioned the snow, Charlie mentioned the snow. I've got my coal stove going now. It's about 70 degrees in here. I'll tell you what, Shed Built Dave, I don't know how you work in that weather. I have to be warm. Maybe it's from all those years I worked in the Middle East, but who knows. So, weather permitting, we're going to be backwards and forwards on this. We've also got the B44 that we're working on. Probably the next video is going to be me modifying the swinging arm, because as you know they've got silent block bushes in there and the customer didn't want them. So I'm going to see about fitting, well, I know it can be done. We're going to look at fitting the needle roller bearings that they have in the B50. I was thinking originally bronze bushes, and I thought, did a couple of measurements, and I think we can put them in without, well, as I say, I've checked on online and a couple of people have done it, so that will be the front end uprated and the back end uprated. And I've been doing some painting, so you'll see that. As I say, that's nothing really interesting, so I'll just show you a couple of bits. It'll give you your weekly fix if I'm sitting by the fire reading another detective story. Okay people, as I say, if you've got any comments about this, constructive comments I might add, send them in, but bear in mind that yep, this is going to be an experiment and it's going to be a budget experiment. You can see here there's a chunk missing out of this liner, so, and I've got a few of these cylinders, they're not exactly rare. So if we ruin one, well, it's just a lesson we learned. But I think it's going to work, and I think that that extra 500cc is going to, 500, God, that would be something. That extra 50cc is going to be useful. If you've read, not Ralph Venables, what's the other fella's name? The one with the beard, the photographer. Anyway, you know who I mean. His book on 4-stroke trials bikes. He mentioned that the BSA comp shop tried all sorts of things, for instance with the B40, and could never get it to run right for trials. They did different head designs, all sorts of things. They always came back to the C15. And although I know there are people here riding around on B44 trials bikes, because B44s are very common in the States, I just have never ridden one that I thought the engine was as nice as the 250 is. So just that little bit extra oomph, I think, might make it just run more to my liking. I must admit I'm a big chuffer. I like my Montesa 348 much more than my TY 250, and I like my B25 much more than the Montesa. So I'm rambling on here. You might think I'm just padding out the video, but anyway, it's not going to be a particularly long one, but it'll keep you going. So comments please, and we will get going with this in the coming weeks. Bye for now.